G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you. Our guest today is Mark Monfort, co-founder of the Australian DeFi Association and NotCentralised, a venture studio focused on AI, including the very own LLM platform SIKE. Mark is also an advisory board member of the Data Science and AI Association of Australia, DSAi. Mark's featured in many publications, on podcasts and conferences as a spokesperson for the DeFi Association. With his background in investment banking and data science, we're really excited to talk to Mark about the intersection of AI, blockchain and DeFi, and to see how blockchain can be the data powerhouse for the AI revolution. Let's dive in. Let's start with your origin story. How did you get interested in blockchain?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because it was something that was not of interest in the slightest. I was working, and when I first heard about blockchain, it was through Bitcoin, and it was through myself working at a investment bank. I was in a research department doing a lot of data analytics and macroeconomic research, and then hearing about one of the other researchers mining Monero. I'm like, oh, is that like a Bitcoin thing? This is like 2016. So it was, really interesting to hear this concept of this new digital money, but it was, kind of waved off by me because like I had no interest in it. Like I wasn't in a position where I needed like the extra income. I didn't hear about anything to do with, the benefits of it in terms of like how it affected me. And it wasn't until, I guess, I was here in Australia and with a business partner, we were talking to some people that were starting to look at creating a gaming project. And they knew that we had a background in like quantitative insights. We were both quants working at a bank, and they'd seen that we'd done that kind of stuff and we'd been prominent in the Aussie community around data. And they said, could you build like a data analytics platform for this game that we've got? And we started off with that. Then we started looking into the space and seeing all these interesting kind of connections. And it led to, from just that first little project and consulting, it led to wanting to create like some connections with people that were going to these meetups. That led to becoming an associate, like creating an association, which we never intended to do. It just kind of happened with the momentum, and then also working in the space. So that was like the end of 2021. Was our origin of really getting into it. But I had heard about it before, just kind of didn't really think much of it back then.
Sure. Well, yeah, I guess 2016 to 2018 was, a particular cohort. And then 2020, 2021, DeFi Summer was another big cohort. So you're kind of bridging now. So you're repping the Australian DeFi Association hoodie there. You mentioned almost by accident starting it. How did that actually come about? And what is it, we should say?
It started out as a WhatsApp group, and we evolved from there. Basically, we're now an association that covers members in different cities, mostly out of Sydney, and it's meant to be an advocacy group and support network. We end up running a whole lot of meetups. I can't tell you the number of meetups. It's in the dozens that we've run over the last couple of years, and I never would have thought myself as an event organizer, but here we are. And so the association really started out as wanting to be a place that people could come to discuss thoughts and ideas and learn, and also advocate for the space between all the other meetups that were going on in Sydney originally, and then it evolved into other cities. But we didn't want to be a meetup group. We actually wanted to be a place that you could gather digitally and not have to wait 30 days for another meetup to happen, just so that you could get your fix of what's going on in the space. And then it just so happened that going through WhatsApp was just a bit of a pain because there weren't different rooms, and there was just a whole stream of 100 messages of consciousness. And then that led to going to Discord and 100 people, 200 people asking for meetups. And so we sponsored the first couple just out of our own pocket, going to bars and pubs and stuff. And then some people that had space said, hey, we've got this. It was the ex-CNBC headquarters. So the folks at Macquarie, which are just across the road from the ASX on Bridge Street. So we did a couple of months of working with the guys there. with Brian, George, Michael, and the folks there doing some cool stuff with events. And then Stone and Chalk came knocking and they said, we've got a dedicated space so you can fit more people in. We are this ecosystem for startups. We love what you're doing with growing this and we like blockchain. Can you come over here? And we've had like a 2-year relationship with those guys now, running pretty much monthly meetups at their venues. And so we never wanted to be a meetup group, but it just felt right to create and become this kind of meetup group. But evolutions happen. We'll be going through more. We're actually going to try to go back to our digital native kind of roots, because meetups are great, but they only really support the people that can attend. And yeah, we film, we live stream and stuff, but there's so much more that could be done. The people that just are not in major cities, or even if they are, they just can't get to these events. So evolution will be happening further there as well. But that's what we've been up to since late 2021 through the association.
You mentioned advocacy as well. Advocacy to whom and for whom, or for what?
It's a good point. Advocacy it's a two-way street. It's both to people that are in the industry and wanting to get into it, and also those that are sitting on the outside that may not be aware of this or how it affects them. So it's advocacy through speaking engagements at non-blockchain conferences and speaking to businesses about it, and basically also the government as well. I guess one of the things that we have done well in terms of the association is it wasn't just a group to, hey, sell, buy, spout, the truths about my tokens and stuff and get into it. It was more about how does the practical effects of this technology work? How does it change and transform things? And that's been our ethos. We've had various projects and exchanges and platforms like come on board and share what they're doing. And I guess the main thing for us has been to showcase what's good out of the space, as well as like how we can, in terms of things like regulation and in terms of like how do we actually, benefit from blockchain. And, what's heartening to see is that in Australia, we've been lucky that government listens. We've got upcoming regulations that will be put forth to be read into Parliament. Treasury, for example, the ones that are writing the rules, they asked us to, because they hadn't done it before, they've asked us to, a year or two ago, to bring developers, it was last year, to bring developers together such that they could listen to what is going on from the developer perspective and what the rules should be and what should be taken into account. So that's never really happened before. Well, blockchain, it's been a lot of the exchanges and lawyers and consultants. This time they actually asked to get developers and we organized roundtables. So that's an example of the advocacy type stuff that we do. It is just something to be that middle ground. Like you've got the strong communities that are out there, and then you've got the people on the outside, the traditional finance, traditional commerce and government. And we want to be that kind of bridge in between it all, really.
Are you finding that like you talk about advocacy to business, is the hardest part of that trying to help companies or founders or, C-suite or, tech people in companies? Is it to help them understand that the technology is accessible, or is it the regulatory landscape that's preventing them from, getting into it? Or is it just they don't see the need or the benefit? How are you selling it, or how are you advocating for blockchain?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess you sell it through the association. If we're just, because I wear the multiple hats, through that side of things, it is case studies and showcasing events and, not just the meetups and seeing that, but also having podcasts where we're talking to people in the community and showcasing what is going on. There's a weekly newsletter that's got a couple thousand subscribers on Substack and also LinkedIn. And, it's through that kind of advocacy. There's a whole lot of people that when I look at like the subscribers, they're not in crypto. They're just ordinary people that are a lot of people from crypto, but then there's a whole lot more that are just ordinary people in businesses elsewhere. I mean, if we're trusting that these are real people and not bots, then yeah, there's a lot of folks that are seeing this just to get their fix of insights of what's going on in the space. Now, there's certainly two types of folks that I see. There's the ones that want to actually, they're interested because they want to make money off it. They want to invest, and that's totally fine. And then there's also the others that are doing it because they want to see how does the tech actually work and how could it, apply to a traditional system, how could blockchain tech help? And we'll get into that a bit more. But it's interesting because through that kind of advocacy, you actually get to see other people's projects. And we've been able to, through my separate company, NotCentralised, get involved in projects where it's actually touching into that real world. So really interesting kind of stuff in terms of like bridging the gap. And we wouldn't have been able to do a whole lot of the work that we're doing right now if it wasn't for starting this association. I wish I'd had this kind of idea with my co-founders for other things that I was in. Like if you want to be known in a space, start an association or something, or better yet, get involved with something that's already existing and, really be an advocate. So yeah, that's the Oz DeFi Association. But like I said, there's going to be a whole lot more like evolution there as we grow with the space.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned regulation a couple of times. I'm wondering, do you think that, does it necessarily go hand in hand that as the industry grows, it requires the regulatory kind of framework or landscape to grow with it? Or are we waiting for the regulations to become very clear and good and effective for blockchain to succeed? Or are we looking for lots of companies to adopt and kind of force the hand of regulators to make things favorable?
That's a good
come first.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Given the things that I'm seeing, I do feel like we're going to get, even though it's been like how many months delayed, years delayed, etc. I feel like we're more likely to actually get the former than the latter, as in to get some form of, and it's not overarching regulation over every single thing that is done in the crypto space. It's mainly to do with like payment and asset providers. But secondly, the amount of distance to cover, and we haven't done ourselves any favors by making it hard to actually work with, and not the scams and stuff that are there, which even though at an overall number level, they sound quite high, they're in the billions of dollars and have been growing. As a percentage of overall market activity in the crypto space, it's actually been getting lower. So, Chainalysis, which is a great analytics kind of platform, they have great insights into this space. And from what they track, even though scams are getting like higher, there is also this number that is going lower, which is the percentage that scams are as part of the overall, network of crypto activity that is tracked. And sure, there's stuff that's not tracked, but we can only talk about what we can measure. And so just going back to it, I feel like even though there are those things there, we have still not done ourselves any favors as a community by having the, kind of crypto bro culture, from making it all about let's first to the post to get, the airdrop, or to sell off their investments to the other suckers that are left behind, not knowing that the project there, whatever it was, either wasn't a real project or it didn't have the actual like rules in the smart contracts to actually do stuff. And there's a whole lot of things like that, that have happened, or, they're overselling. And this is why I think regulations are necessary. Like penny stocks, for example, and even stocks that are just like risky, there's a whole lot of warnings and labels around them. There's a whole lot of like community around like helping people avoid getting hit by those. And yes, it still happens, but there was very little of that with crypto. And so people just saw a way of making money and then got suckered into things that didn't work out. And unfortunately, that masks a lot of the benefits that crypto has. Like if you take away all the noise and the hype, there's so much good things that this could be useful for. And, I've got so many that we could like dive into, but just unfortunately, we didn't do ourselves favors. So adding to the point that not only are our regulations closer in terms of like getting to that finish line first, even if we wanted to focus on the latter, we've got such an uphill battle because like we've just lost a whole lot of trust. Sure, Bitcoin is at all-time highs because everyone is like, being positive about like the outcome of the election. The crypto site kind of won, even though both sides were saying they were going to do crypto stuff. But still, I still think that regulations are going to come sooner, and we just have to deal with that. So that's kind of the take that I've got just from the observations I see at like both ends, being close to the community and being close to like what's going on regulation side. But that's not to say that won't change in future. So we'll see.
Most high-profile industries, shall we say, tend to try to self-regulate to kind of front run regulators in making, because the fear is, like, for example, 2018 or before 2018, I was working with some blockchain related companies, and we were working with the Australian Taxation Office and Securities Investment Group, ASIC, in a regulatory sandbox where they basically said, yeah, let's report what you're doing. And as we're developing, the first kind of tranche of regulations, we would report to them, and everything seemed to be going well. And people were, we had a duty of care, obviously, to clients and customers and whatnot. And people tended to be pretty happy with how things are going in 2017, 18. But then April 2018 comes along, and as they come back and say, drops the hammer and the mic and says, here's some regulations. And now our financial licenses or things that were legal and in the sandbox are now illegal, or there were particularly harsh penalties for particular things. And again, I think regulation is actually really important, like you were just saying. I'm wondering, is there any possibility of blockchain or Web3 as an industry, as a sector, is there any possibility of self-regulation? Or is the fact that it is distributed, which is one of the key tenets and benefits, is that the thing that actually prevents us from self-regulation, because any player can jump in and do whatever they want?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, speaking of the ASIC side of things, I was just at the a few weeks ago, the Australian Financial Review had their crypto summit, and ASIC spoke there. And the headline in the AFR that day, and obviously it was all well timed for this, but it was something to do with almost like anything to do with crypto. Any company working or startup in the space is going to need some sort of like financial license, and it's like, really. It's an extremity. I don't agree with that. I agree with protections and regulations where necessary, especially high risk things. But in terms of self-regulation, what's really interesting is that in a way, blockchain can better regulate than traditional forms of regulation. And what I mean by that is, in the real world, like right now, without much blockchain in there, we have rules and regulations, and if you break those, there's enforcement after the fact. But with blockchain, so for example, people got in trouble for selling, and this is the example I always go to, selling wholesale securities meant for professional investors, not retail, mums and dads, but they were able to sell it to mums and dads. And there was a case of Binance, for example, not being allowed here in Australia to sell derivatives, and yet some people who weren't allowed to get that were getting those types of products. And so they got their slap on the wrist for that. If we use blockchain smart contracts the way that they can be, none of those situations would have happened, because there's enforcement in there. If you're not whitelisted to be able to buy this security because you're not tagged on the list as like a professional investor, you're just, no matter how much I want to, you're just not going to be able to do it. Unfortunately, we don't use the tech well enough. Like, it's like
With
AI
smart pile of smart contracts.
Exactly. Like, it's like AI people not actually using AI in terms of like how they do things in their day to day. They want to build it for one product, and yet, going back to blockchain, like the ICOs, the initial kind of crypto offerings or coin offerings that were put out there that had a whole lot of problems, where people were getting told, hey, for sweat equity, do these things and you'll get this much percentage of allocation, and then getting robbed, as we say in the industry, or not getting the promises fulfilled. That kind of stuff should have been in the smart contracts, because you're guaranteed then that as soon as this other wallet receives X amount of money, you're going to get your allocation. And it's just a rule, and it's immutable, and it's transparent, and you can see it. See, we don't use the tech enough. But going back to regulations, I feel like blockchain, not only could we self-regulate aspects of what we're doing, but we could regulate in ways that are even better. And in fact, ASIC, being the enforcement agency, should be looking at blockchain kind of tech as a way to not only help for blockchain, but also how do you regulate other spaces as well? So it's the irony that, the sweet irony of what's going on out there, that some in the industry, they want to work in a space that has no regulation. Others want the regulation. People are, the complaint at the AFR, I'm just going back to my thoughts on that, was that the industry is asking, and players in the space are asking for regulation, and yet ASIC has only started coming to the table properly and engaging with the industry, is what's been said, only in the last couple of months as we're getting closer to having some sort of like regulation put out there. And it sounded like, an extreme kind of form is what they're pushing for. Luckily, they're the enforcement agency. Maybe they have influence of the rules, but it's Treasury that writes the rules. So we await and see. There's still a process. Like even after they write a bill, it needs to be read into Parliament a few times. It has consultations that still happen. But even if we get to that space where there's now rules for crypto, I feel like it's going to be like Spotify, right? Like the rules and regulations are going to be interesting because it'll mean that you have to have certain protections that are there. And those rules will be like the mainstream. The conveniences will be there, just like we have with Spotify. But the Pirate Bay is still something that's out there. People watch that TV series on Netflix that was about how Spotify got started. Like Pirate Bay was still there before. It's still there today. I think we're just going to have options for people to do, different things. But yeah.
That is, you're looking at the industry and seeing Napster or the Pirate Bay. Yeah. Whereas in actual fact, we're trying to be Spotify.
Well, yeah, I think, and we've got every element of this space from the people that are coming into it now. Like there's a whole lot of libertarians in the space, and I think that's great. Unfortunately, there is a saying that is ringing true for a lot of very decentralized projects where I don't know who coined this, and it comes from, I think they copied it from something similar in the world of data analytics and data science, but it's decentralized until it hurts and centralized until it works. And what that basically means is that, yeah, you can decentralize all this stuff, but as soon as you need conveniences, you need to be able to lower costs. All of a sudden we get late twos. We had these transaction bottlenecks, and then we've solved it with zero knowledge rollups. But they're effectively an accounting kind of transaction that happens in a centralized kind of way. And great, you get things cheap, but we had to do that to afford protections to people because decentralized completely just wasn't working. So I think there are elements, at least right now, where the technology is, and maybe it will evolve in future, and maybe we can decentralize even further. But just where we are now, it's going to be very hard for anyone to just have complete decentralization if they want it to kind of work to have, say, things like protections and stuff like that consumers are asking for. And maybe that's been why not a lot of people have been, getting into the whole DeFi side of things, like on the investment side. Maybe that's been a bit of a bottleneck, but who knows? We continue to advocate. We continue to see, advances, whether it's real world asset tokenization or it's other projects that are starting to use blockchain or companies that are traditional starting to look at blockchain and do stuff with it. We're continuing to see that. And, it's just needing to continue to be involved in this space and advocate for it.
Yeah. Are you keeping up with like the AI regulations and how things are going there? And is it following a similar protracted trajectory as Web3, or are they? Is it
feels like it's faster?
Yeah,
it feels like
a bigger potential threat.
Yeah. Well, the interesting, exactly. Like because it's such, it's closer to being accepted by the mainstream. Like I could see, for example, I'm not saying this is actually happening, but you could see that maybe government, whoever the decision makers are, whatever department, politicians, etc., they see that, well, there's people using it, but it's not really affecting industries in a way that we need to act upon now. And let's say it was like 2017, 2018. There's a bit of experimentation, but it's not hurting our housing markets. It's not hurting our, mining and traditional banking and all that kind of stuff. So until it does, then we'll do something. Just like with Uber. Uber did the opposite. They came in, no regulations, let's just go hard. And we should have taken that strategy, make it easy, make it like Uber, and maybe we would be in that position. Unfortunately not. But just going back to the whole AI side of things, there's a lot of parallels. And for people that have been in blockchain and they're seeing the stuff that AI is going through, they're just like, man, it's like your little brother going through school and having to go deal with these teachers and these lessons. And so one thing that... Sorry, what was that?
You've seen it before. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one thing that AI goes through is right now is the whole environmental aspect that, you need these large scale warehouses that have these GPUs and they're so expensive and all that kind of stuff. Where have we heard that before? Blockchain. And yet more than 50% of anything that is done to do mining, so the proof of work rather than proof of stake, anything that actually requires a whole lot of mining going on, that is more than 50% of it is now, what do you call it, like renewable energy. So because of all of that, like, the space has evolved. Yeah, you could have had the complaints at the start. I can see the same thing happening for the whole AI space on that topic where, it's really expensive to do things at the start, just like anything is really expensive. But then all of a sudden it's working on your phone. You had AI that's as powerful as GPT-4 and the other powerful LLMs now. You could have some of that kind of stuff just working on your device. Like, I think we will move to that kind of stuff. And then going back to regulations, they're looking at doing here in Australia and the Europe folks, they've got the EU AI Act, which seems that, there's regulations in place that they've come across like very quickly, quite restrictive in some ways. And then the US is looking at things like within the state of California, they've got the SB 1047 bill that's being looked to pass. Here in Australia, we've got something called the guardrails. So right now they're voluntary AI guardrails, but they are looking to make them mandatory. And they've had consultation to go out to different people, 255 responses. I am responsible for 2 of those. So one of those was from my company that I also work with that does AI stuff called SIKE, SIKE. The other one was a response I put together after conducting a few roundtables with others for something called the Build Club, which is a great AI community that helps builders and anyone interested in the space to just get started. But what was the takeaways there, was that we, like myself and these others, like we were saying that there needs to be like a hub and spoke approach to this, like not have AI guardrails on every single thing you do in AI, but only on high risk things. And when it comes to high risk, sure, we should have the guardrails which require things like having a human in the loop. So I don't care if your AI is giving me advice and you're a doctor. I just want to know that you have read the advice before it reaches me, the patient, or if it's a lawyer situation or financial advisor, anything high risk like that. When it's just general stuff like, hey, summarize this movie for me or this YouTube video, or people might watch this video and go, give me a summary of what the hell the guys were speaking about. Sure, AI is useful there. I don't think needs much regulation. So we said stuff like that. And on human in the loop, and this is where the blockchain side comes in, interestingly enough, it's a blessing that blockchain came first before the generative, not overall AI. We've had AI for a while, but before generative AI and all these rules came in place. Because why? I think that by having that, being able to say that you've got a human in the loop, we're going to need to have some sort of proof to say that me, the doctor, signed off that I looked at the advice before it went out to you, even though AI wrote it. And so what we can do is we can have blockchain as a way to transparently, immutably record that. And why we would want to do that is because it stops tampering. Because if it's just a log file in a system, like a text file, anyone can edit that. And then secondly, by having something... Exactly. And by having something called zero knowledge proofs. And look, going back to that blockchain stuff, there's various types of blockchain, folks, and everyone will immediately jump on this and go, how can we record all of that kind of stuff onto the blockchain and stuff? Everyone can see it. First of all, there's private blockchains. Second of all, zero knowledge proofs are a way that we can record information about something that's happened. Let's say it's this digital signature and it's got information about who signed it, what was in the input, what was in the output. We can record it with a zero knowledge proof so that no one can see anything in there unless they're authorized to. And we can also prove things about that data without actually having to move the data around. And so there are ways that, blockchain actually can help work being done in the AI space, let alone regulation. So I think that, it's a really interesting kind of time that we're in, and hopefully we are just being able to paint the picture more for people that they can see the light that, yes, we can see these two technologies working together.
How are you thinking about AI? Obviously, you're well into it. How are you thinking about it when it comes to the various hats that you wear with NotCentralised and SIKE and Oz DeFi Association? How is it coming into your thinking in those different spheres? And maybe even just personally, like as a human being, how are you thinking about AI?
Interestingly, it's something that I don't think of enough. And what I mean by that is that every day, or when you get to like take a step back and look, there's still gaps in terms of like where more we could actually be using AI and the stuff that we're doing, whether it's work or even just personal, right? But what's interesting that we've discovered over the last like couple of months of, advancing our work in the space, and since we've been involved, is just seeing just how much more transformational it is in almost every aspect that we're doing. Like I've got projects right now where I would not be able to do these things had it not been for AI, or it would have taken twice the amount of time to learn new programming languages and, create new ways of building some of the tech that we're building and making it even user friendly, from planning and initiation of an idea of a project to the execution of that. The tools that have come out over the last like couple of months have made that like when GPT came out, it was okay. And you had to 10 times try something just to get a bit of code to work if you were going to use it for that. Now, maybe you just try 5 times, 4 times. Sometimes it's just one shot to get something like working as a component. Because of that, it has meant that all of this extra time that we've got, we've been able to take projects further than we ever could have. And what I think about right now, my immediate thoughts as we're chatting is, where else can AI just automate and give advice and help us come up with things? Because there's a whole lot more that we aren't tapping into. So that's one big thing. And the other part is just how do we actually share this and make it easy? Because that's great for the nerd like me, but how do you actually make it super easy for others to use where they don't even realize they're using AI, but at the same time they get educated because they get some uplift over, oh, right, I just chat into this chat box and out comes an answer. And look, the evolution is that before the answers just came out, now the answers come out and there's some sort of trust stamp or something like that. Sure. Like a level of reliability that just wasn't there before. So I think about that as well, like how far we need to advance in terms of our usage, but also at the same time, just how to make it like much easier for people to use. Because I think if we learn the lessons from that and do well, it leads to what we should be doing for blockchain too.
So I remember back in my school days, which is a while ago now, there was a bit of a movement to say, hey, your brain, or maybe even your mind, is really good at processing data and thinking about things, not great at storing things. So forget trying to memorize everything, just work on how to think, become a really good thinker, because you can go find the data any way you like. Whereas it seems to be in the last couple of years, we're even now outsourcing our thinking more than ever before. What do you think this means? This might be too philosophical, perhaps. So, I don't know if you've thought about this before. What does it mean for humans to not just outsource remembering things, but to outsource even the thinking of things? Like what is it going to do to us for us to not challenge our minds in the ways that we have necessarily had to for millennia, all of a sudden, like with no kind of no evolutionary margin, if you like, which just all of a sudden within a couple of years, we go from thinking to, I don't need to think because there's this box that does better thinking than I can do.
It's fascinating, right? Like any new technology that comes out, it goes from first being a technical thing, typically, that only technical people can use, to after a while, it gets easier to use. More people come into the space, or, like the AI kind of box that you described there. It'll get to the point where it's just super easy to just ask the AI to do something for you. And now you've got all this spare time. There's going to be, in that situation, I believe there's always like the two types of people, the ones that will try to do something with that and go, well, I've got this spare time. How do I evolve my, whatever I'm using it for sports, for work, for life? How do I evolve that more with the time that I've got, if they want to use the AI for that, or they go off and, recharge, go on holidays. And there's those people that will use this as a way of going, okay, well, I'm done. Give me my universal basic income kind of check, a UBI check, and I'm done. I'm going to the beach. I think the danger with that, because there are people that want that automation kind of happening, is that, well, where's your value now? I mean, great, you're getting a UBI, but I don't know how we're going to maybe sustain that and stuff. I think that, we it's really hard to imagine, like for me being someone that's always just like up all the time and, ADDing things, just what that world kind of looks like. But I do think that there is more hope that, because if you look at what we did in the 60s, what we used to do in the 20s, going back to our agricultural days as well, we're not plowing fields. Most people aren't. Like, we have evolved our lives. What that looks like, there's going to need to be, some sort of economic benefit to people from having something like this. Like, people who never watched Star Wars probably should now, because you take a look at, something that they've got there where there is no work and they just go and explore different societies. They've got this equilibrium now. How they've resolved conflicts, I can't remember, but because they've got this magic box that can create anything. You want food, it creates food. You want a device, it creates a device for you. The magic box does that kind of stuff. It's almost akin to AI. What that world looks like is going to be interesting. But at the same time, I think we do overhype a lot of what AI can currently do. And sure, it will improve, but it's worthwhile imagining. Like, I listen to both the doomers, the AI doomers, or the what do you call it? I think effective accelerationists. No, the de-accelerationists, DAC. So D-ACC, the de-acceleration, want to slow things the heck down, want 6 months off from developing anything, which doesn't work because the world will continue and it won't happen, right? And then there's the effective, accelerationists that just want us to go hard at everything. And I think it lies somewhere in the middle, being pragmatic. But going back to what you were saying there, like the regulation side of things just happens to seem like it's going to happen a lot faster. Here in Australia and in other countries, it's already there. And it's been because of generative AI. AI has been around forever, like 70, 80 years since Turing and all that kind of stuff. But it's generative AI that's really kicked these things off because of the deep fakes, because of the potential for voice cloning and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got all these other positives. Like, there's a whole matter of productivity gains that we can get if we do things the right way. But there's a whole lot of noise in the space, man. So I don't know. It's like swimming through all of that. Like, and funnily enough, I used to run a data science association. I've handed over control of that to some others because it was just too much to do. Like, and that's a space with a whole lot more noise. But yeah, interesting stuff, really.
Well, are you thinking that? So obviously, you've been in blockchain for a while now, and one of, again, the kind of key tenets, philosophically at least, for many in that arena, not all but many, is that the distributed nature of networks or the decentralization. When you're thinking about AI, you mentioned, there's the DAC guy saying, hey, let's take 6 months off. For me, I'm thinking, man, the cat is out of the bag. We've already got armor out there that, the proverbial 14-year-old programmer, in a developing country could, have access to or download onto their, PC, 10-year-old PC or whatever, and make their own. So, cat's out of the bag. When it comes to decentralization, do you think that a centralized version of AI is going to win or is better even maybe? Or should we be trying to, either from a regulatory perspective or just general in terms of humanity, should we be really pushing for a distributed or decentralized artificial intelligence kind of standard?
It's funny because it does feel like a bit of war games, you could say, when it comes to the race to have AGI, artificial general intelligence, like the machine, or, let's call it, even if it's software and hardware mix, like it's a machine that basically can just generally think and reason like a human. Because as soon as it gets to that and it gets that inkling of learning, cat is out the bag even further. And maybe we get to Skynet, maybe not. But the interesting thing is that there is a race, and OpenAI is openly, going after that sort of like scenario, as are others. Who gets there first? Maybe the ones that have the most money, but that's not always the case. And it's definitely not always the case that the winners in the market are the ones that are first there. Apple did not get into the smartphone market until later in the game. So it doesn't have to be these first players. So that's the one thing. So with
They have
that,
a huge advantage though, in terms of resources and head start and whatnot.
yeah, they
The chips and
like the resources being the people, resources being all the intelligence that they've gathered from making their app free. If something's free, folks, you remember you're the data, right? So you're the board really. But going back to it, like the other side, it's been great seeing, Llama from Meta, like the group that stole all your data, through you playing an app that was like Animal Crossing, like, kind of game, and giving up some personal info to get access to an app and having all that farmed and used in various countries by Cambridge Analytica to influence elections and do various nefarious things, you could argue. That same company that they've admitted to. Exactly. It's a very good point. There's a whole lot more we don't know. Yet the flip side is that, and, Zuckerberg's got his whole makeover thing going on as well, looking less like an alien and looking like a former, boy band member with his gold chain and everything. But it's interesting. And I definitely believe that people can and companies can reform. But, you always got to take it with a grain of salt. Llama's one. There are other open source providers out there that are providing their tools and making it available. The benefits of decentralization kind of technology from blockchain, one of the biggest ones isn't just the distributed nature of the tech, but the distributed nature of how the smart contracts work. You can build off the backs of what others have done. We're not all building in silos. Yeah, there's an element of that, but by having it open source, it makes it so much easier to get something started because there are the tools there in place. And it's all about execution rather than, hey, you're going to steal my idea. And I feel like with AI, we're in that bubble where it's starting to sway whether or not it goes to one way and is completely decentralized, or we continue the good fight and have these, centralized on the one side and having the decentralized kind of tech, or let's call it open source tech on the other side. Hard to see where it does go. I feel like we'll have a balance. We can't stop just because of the sheer amount of money going to these companies. There's probably going to be a few so-called winners out there. I think the real thing will really change when one of those groups actually creates something that is AGI and it is robots that can learn and actually be like it is. Because right now where we're at, and here's a question mark on that, will we actually get to it given the way that the current technology works? Like, a lot of people don't know this, but AI is, when I say AI, I am talking about generative AI, large language models, predictive text on steroids, basically. And because it's predictive text, it's probability. It is not something where it is just 100% reliable. And when I say reliable, I am talking about potential for hallucinations. You are getting things where people are thinking, well, does it reason? And unless it's seen it before, it's not providing good amounts of reasoning. So there are question marks over whether we get to AGI. But if we do, I think that's when things really kick off.
What do you mean when you say things?
No, good point. I mean that the fight, the war, and when I say war, I don't mean literal war like Skynet, but like a proverbial war where it's between the companies and the open source kind of places. Because right now it's kind of even. If you're an open source kind of like developer, or if you're a small startup, for the most part, you've got tools that even like, say, the big four also have access to. When it gets to like AGI and that cat's out the bag, I get the feeling that that's only going to be able to be something that's afforded by the biggest of companies. And then that gap of knowledge potentially accelerates. Like the information gap that we see in the world that we have right now is such that if you have that knowledge, if you've got that, the what do you call it? Like the big four consulting firms, not just the accounting firms, but also the McKinseys and whatnot, BCG, etc. If you got access to some of that kind of stuff because you got the money to pay for it, it's seen as like a massive thing. And yet with AI, anyone, whether you're a small business owner with a fish shop, you can use ChatGPT, the same ChatGPT that someone that is an accounting professional or the assistant to the CEO is also able to access. But when we get to AGI, I feel like we could get to that space because that's a really special thing, having an AI that can actually think and generalize and learn. Because right now, like I said, because it's a probability model, it only reasons if you actually give it the problem and how that's been solved before. If you give it a new problem, or they found this, right? Let's say that you have a problem where you're describing how, three animals or people, they go over here and then they do this thing and then they go over there. Who did what? Like whatever the problem is. If you change the names from the original problem, the AI doesn't get it right anymore. It can't figure that out. It's so weird, right? And it's because the way that it's been trained, it's the way that it, learns. But at the same time, what's been interesting is that we see a lot of mimicry in terms of how our brains are actually set up. So they've found that there's a whole lot of synapses that get connected when the AI is asked to think about something. The way that it fires off or focuses less on the noise because there's a whole lot of information, and it focuses only on keywords, just like humans do, because we're inundated with a whole lot of sensory, things going on. And yet we're able to focus because we can block a lot of those things out. So there's a lot of similarities between how we learn and AI. So I think it's certainly interesting seeing just where we're at now. It's a bit of an evenish kind of playing field, even though not many people are getting involved. But I do see that, potentially changing, and maybe just like blockchain actually helps not just from a protection and security kind of aspect, but in terms of helping level the playing field, or doing things like there's the whole copyright side of things, and people complain, well, what do we do about that? Well, maybe it means that if something's being used to train the AI, it has to be recorded to a blockchain where you can, if you've got the right kind of access through zero knowledge proofs, prove whether or not your data was used as part of it. As a, just a brainwave kind of thought, like we can actually use technology together to better show things. But anyway, it all comes down to what people think is the cheapest, easiest, and most effective way for them to do stuff that they're aware of that they need. But we'll see.
Yeah. Well, talk more about the intersection of blockchain technology and AI technology, or various technologies. They're not siloed, obviously. And like you said before, even if we get AGI or LLMs become exceptionally good at what we want to use them for, and not just like they are now. So it's not just that we outsource our intelligence making, but we actually get better at making intelligence. We get better at using the tools at our disposal, which I guess is what you were saying before, rather than sitting on the proverbial beach getting a universal basic income. How are technologies currently being utilized together, and where do you see that kind of going in the future? What are some of the opportunities ahead, do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. So one thing is in terms of products, I see blockchain and AI typically come together where folks are creating ways that the data that the blockchain is, that the AI is based on, is stored decentralized in that way. So it's, having decentralized computers, or like what they call decentralized physical infrastructure. So that's one way that it's being done. There's also ways that groups are creating private AI so that only you can access those things. So that's another one. And the work that we're doing, where it's actually using blockchain to protect the way that you prove humans are in the loop. Because anyone right now could have an AI product that, hey, you click this button, that's supposed to prove that, a human was there as part of the loop. But I trust it, and going back to that thing that we mentioned before. So using blockchain to not only help record that information so it's tamper proof, but also being able to record it in such a way that you don't have to share all the information. You can selectively disclose all, some, or maybe even selectively disclose none, because all you're sending back from a query is a true or false, with no data moving around and stuff. And so helping to, if we move to that world, because it's undeniable that these things are efficiency gains. I mean, ASIC even had a test, and it was a recently published test that was with AWS, where they tested whether or not AI was good at writing things versus humans. And, unfortunately, they didn't share the details of what was being asked, like the actual details. They gave summary of what was happening. But we don't get the actual queries. We don't get the actual like context of I think we got some of the questions and stuff, but we don't get to actually see the results. AI was asked this, it spat out that. Because if we did, being professionals in the space, or even just people knowledgeable of this space, we would be able to maybe critique that. And maybe that's why they didn't want to do it. But the point was that they said, oh, look, AI is not as good as like humans and stuff. And it's just like, hang on a second. That depends on a wide variety of things going on there. And then there was also like in Tasmania, Department of Planning got in trouble by the opposition because Department of Planning said that they used generative AI to help, create whether or not it was a good idea to have this investor from overseas actually, build this hotel. Would it be of economic benefit to the community? And so they used AI. Now, did they use it for all decision making? Did they use it for part of it? Was it for evidence gathering? What exactly was done there? And the opposition said, "Oh, look, they've done this and it's bad." And it's become such a battle ground how you use it, or like politicians, like even if it would help them to be able to answer messages to their constituency much faster. I'm not just saying like AI does everything, but just having something that provides a quick response that can be vetted rather than having someone like copy and paste or like write out an individual response. If something is acting like an assistant that can just help you get to answers faster, it's like, you might not have access to those kinds of people because it's just not something that you can afford, yet you can have AI do this kind of stuff. So, the intersection, just going back to that with like blockchain and AI, I feel like from protection kind of angle, AI is definitely going to benefit from having blockchain involved. And on the flip side, blockchain projects where AI is actually used to help people understand what is going on with that. Like I see a future, and whether or not we get to this, and I might just get frustrated and build these things, right? But seeing people where they don't understand what's going on in a project, yet the smart contracts are available. But before generative AI, no one knew, not no one, but like, let's just say the average layman wouldn't know how to read it to vet whether or not something's real or to critique a white paper. You'd see groups that would put out a white paper and like, if you know how to read it, you'd see holes in it. Others wouldn't. And so having the assistant that is just there for everyone to help you reason, to your own decision making and help you avoid making dumb decisions, I think is something that AI massively can help, especially in a space like blockchain. But like I said, going back to the start,
for non-coders. So one of the things you said before about, the code is there in the smart contract so we can know that it's true, but most people don't understand smart contracts, let alone how to code at all. But to be able to import maybe a smart contract, run it through an AI filter and say, tell me what this smart contract does and doesn't do, or does it protect me this way or this way, this way? Actually, I have literally never thought of that before just now, but that seems like a very helpful thing to do when it comes to blockchain.
Maybe should even be a service. We work in the blockchain space, and we know about like the critiques that are out there. There's a great one and she's been going at it for a while, although I think she gets a lot of things wrong. Molly White, like she gets a lot of things right in terms of her reporting of the scams and things that go wrong with blockchain. Great, nothing to argue about there. But then in terms of like, I've seen some of her talks and the way that she thinks about the space, there's misconceptions that are out there. Maybe it's not a lot. I'm too harsh there, but she created this great service. Maybe there should be a service just like that that's run through AI that takes all the public smart contracts of every new project that's out there that you can get, and I'm sure that there'd be a way where CoinGecko, something new gets listed, AI immediately searches for that, whether there's a white paper on GitHub or off the website. If there is, runs it through, calls bullshit on it, something like that. And it's there.
So let's make it, sell it to CoinGecko, and have a great Christmas.
Yeah, look, the thing is, here's the thing I want people to get as an idea to take away from all of this. And like I've had to park different projects just because I don't have the time to do them anymore, or I wanted to upgrade them, I just put them aside and stuff. I'm starting just to tinker and go back and actually build some of these things, because with the great tools that are out there, not only can I build better front ends, I can do things that I was never able to do before, create some of these apps. I never knew how to use like this kind of tool or that kind of tool. And yet you can ask the AI and goes, here's what you do. And yeah, you'll make mistakes, but then you just go, here's my mistake. How do I fix this? If you've got the patience and persistence, it's actually easier now than it was like a year ago. But that's the thing. The unlock is there. People just need to seize that opportunity. And if they don't know where to get started, even ask the AI what to do. Like, that's the greatest thing. So anyway, there's a whole lot to learn there, really.
We are fast running out of time. So I do want to ask you, what are your 3 fearless forecasts for 2025? Where do you see us going in AI, DeFi, data, blockchain? What are your kind of 3 big ticket items?
First and foremost, I know we mentioned this throughout the show, but I think that AI gets more blockchain as a part of it. We're starting to see more blockchain becoming mainstream with digital IDs from Argentina to Australia, dabbling in that space with their proof of concept work. And also just like the protections and infrastructure where AI has more blockchain as part of it for protections and whatnot. I reckon another thing is we definitely get to Bitcoin at 100K, maybe by the end of the year. We ran through 75K, the highest. I know we've only got like a month and a half left, but maybe early next year we get to 100K if things keep on going according to plan. And crypto becoming the US becoming a really friendly place for crypto again. And then I guess the last thing would be seeing more blockchain tech in various areas of life that people don't even realize, whether it is your frequent flyers or like rewards and points like that, to even certain payments that you're making to other people because you're using a system in the middle, that system that maybe runs on fiat, that is the traditional kind of banking rails that maybe is expensive to run, moving to blockchain where you, the consumer, the person getting paid, don't have to worry about blockchain, but it's the middle part that is tokenized and more digital. That kind of thing I think is going to happen a whole lot more, so that we get the benefits without having to do the whole pain of onboarding and getting a 12-word seed phrase. So I think crypto becomes more mainstream, but it does so in ways that maybe are less sexy, a bit more boring, but definitely more beneficial to society.
Yeah, man, I think they're safe bets. I think I reckon you're spot on with all 3 of those. What about I always like to ask at the end of the show, what is your most contrarian view? So if you're swimming one way, everyone else is swimming the other way. Do you have any? It doesn't have to be controversial necessarily. Just what's your contrarian perspective?
Didn't think about that. Look, I think that the way that we're heading with tech, it certainly seems like it's a world where it's just going to be the same as before. And what I mean by that is that there's the haves and the have-nots. I reckon that we can and we will get to a space, maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, but where there's a more even kind of playing field, and that the next unicorn could potentially come from a one person, human, man, anyone, child even, a one person kind of company that just has learned how to use the different technologies. By that time, the technologies are much easier to use and blend it together. And maybe there's even quantum as part of it. Who knows? But I reckon the contrarian is that a lot of people think that it's only going to come from like the big companies. I see a future where it's going to be some unknown out there that we've never heard of, that right now, as we're talking, is doing something in the background or getting the experiences just like Steve Jobs did, going to his India kind of adventures. And learn that style and art that led to iPhone stuff. Someone out there is creating something, or like learning, and just is going to be that next trillionaire potentially. So yeah, that's what I see. I don't think it's going to be a big company.
Yeah, good on you. Man, imagine how many people like Elon Musk, for example, there are in the world at any one time, and yet you only really get one of them rising because of the way things are. But potentially, exactly like you say, there might be 10 or 100 or 1,000 people who just don't have the opportunity, but perhaps now they do.
Think about this, right? Like there was and we didn't mention it, but it has been in the news recently, where an AI chatbot was given $50,000 by some investors, Mark Andreessen, and it decided, now I don't know all the details, like how much human involvement there was, but let's just say it all did it itself. It decided to create a meme coin call it GOAT. And it convinced a whole lot of people through its Twitter account to invest in it. And I think it created like a separate Twitter account as well to support it. Whatever it was, if it's all AI, just having the amount of people that bought into that, and it's worth hundreds of millions of dollars at NotCentralised, and I don't know where it is now. Just imagine if that was used for good, because that kind of stuff is very short term. Like you're buying into it, yeah, but where do you get anything? And eventually people might just sell out unless it actually creates something good. If someone was doing that, like man and machine partnered together to create something that is of long-term, continuous, sustained benefit for society, that's a winner right there. So, if a little AI thing can do this, imagine what you could do by being, meaningful with it.
Yeah, man, that's cool to think about. Mark, really appreciate you coming on the show today. If people want to find out more about you or about NotCentralised or about SIKE or about the Aussie DeFi Association, where can they find you online?
I'm on LinkedIn, so reach out to me on Mark Monfort, or you can find me on Twitter as well as CAPTDEFI, Capt DeFi. I used to go by Captain DeFi as the name. Sometimes go by that, but times are changing and stuff. But you can find me on both of those platforms really easily.
Good on you. Thanks very much.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Off Chain. We love bringing you great guests like Mark and hope we've inspired you to learn more about Web3 and about technology. As always, like and subscribe, or better yet, share this episode with a friend. Help us spread the word and join us again next week for another exciting episode of Off Chain with me, Don Redden. Till then, take care.